I think in the interest of time, let's go ahead and get started. I have turned on recording for the meeting. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to introduce to you John Gaede, who has offered to share some time, or has had his arm twisted to share some time with us this morning. John is the CIO at San Juan Regional Medical Center in New Mexico, so our neighbor, but kind of on the other side of the state. Before joining San Juan Medical Center, John was the CIO at Klamath Falls, Oregon, Sky Lakes Medical Center. And in 2020, they experienced a ransomware attack, and we're down as a health system for, I think, a couple of weeks. And John is generously going to share some time with us to help us understand what happened, how they recovered from that event, and some lessons learned from that. So this is great timing as we head into some of our tabletops, both with IT, the executive staff, and the whole hospital. So happy to have John, and thank you for sharing your time with us today.
You're welcome. So a delight to be with you all this morning. I appreciate it. So let me figure out here the best way to share, because I'd like to see you guys too. See, share. Let's just start here. Can you guys see the slide deck?
Yes.
All right. Is it large enough that you can actually see it?
Yeah, looks good.
You're good? Okay. Very good then. I'm going to just slide this here. Let me just rearrange this here because I want to see you guys too at the same time. So let's do this. There we go. All right. So again, thank you so much for your time this morning. And I'm going to just transparently share with you guys a journey of what happened at Sky Lakes. So I was at Sky Lakes Medical Center for 9 years. And let me just give you a little bit of background. I was a medical technologist for 9 years and worked in the laboratory. And unbeknownst to me, that started an IT career. As a med tech working in the lab, started automating some things in the lab, and it started an IT career. I was at El Centro Regional Medical Center, a 150-bed hospital in Southern California for 11 years, consulted for a short time, and then 4 years at UC San Diego Health, working and running their laboratory informatics division, and then nine years at Sky Lakes, and then I'm 9 weeks in as CIO at San Juan Regional Medical Center. So our agenda for today, we're going to walk through the background, give you some idea of the size of the hospital, what happened, what we did to recover, and the steps of doing that. So a little bit about Sky Lakes, so you guys understand the context. Sky Lakes.
Hey, John. Yeah. We lost your presentation. We don't see that.
Did it come back?
It did.
Yes.
Okay. How about now? Is it, or I lose it? We're good?
No, we saw you good.
Okay, excellent. All right, so Sky Lakes is a not-for-profit standalone community hospital. You guys can understand that. In Midland 2, you have to drive about 100 miles in any direction to get healthcare. So we take care of region, and I understand that's very much like Midland as well. So we've got about, well, they're at about 1,600 employees, 300 volunteers, about a 10,000 square mile area of people who get care at Sky Lakes, outpatient visits over 400,000 a year, about 28,000 ED visits a year, and they're actually about 750 a million a year from gross patient revenue. So that kind of gives you the size of the hospital. And if you're into geography, Oregon's a beautiful place. And you can see I kind of put a box down there. So it's South Central Oregon. We care for, that's that kind of 10,000 square mile radius that we care for. And if you want healthcare, here it is. You go to Sky Lakes, or you go 98 miles to the east, about 100 miles to the south, and both of those are critical access hospitals. 140 miles north up to Bend, Oregon, which is a 5-hospital system, St. Charles system, and 72 miles to the west, and you have to go over the Cascade Mountain Range to get there, and that'll become important in this story. for our patients. So what happened? So all of you can just think with me. Imagine about 3:30 in the morning, you're deep in your sleep, you're getting one of those rare nights of really good rest, you're in REM, and a phone call rings, and it's your manager saying, John, we've been hit with ransomware. That's what happened. So on Monday, the 26th, we got hit with Ryuk ransomware, and we got hit on Monday, but IT was not notified until 1:30 a.m. Tuesday, October 27th. Phone call comes in to our network engineer who happened to be on call, and you guys are familiar with this. Again, in a hospital of this size, we have about 45 employees that work, and that covers, and we're an Epic Community Connect, about 45 employees that cover IT, and so we rotate call and all those kind of things. And Kevin Crowder was the engineer on call, and he gets a call at 1:30 in the morning, and the call says that the system is slow. Epic's really slow, and then the nurse says also, and I can't access email. So this is the actual timeline assembled by Cisco Talos. So this is really important for you all to see, because you're going to see points in time where you can intervene in these kind of things and make a big difference. But for us, it was a perfect storm, and I'll explain that. So at 12:08 on Monday, an email comes in. It's a Google document offering a bonus. When this employee clicks on that link, the bad actors, by the way, it goes to a 0-day site, and it drops it was rep termination.exe file with Bazar Loader, the tools the bad actors use. Notice the time at 12:34, so about a half an hour later, their bad actor tools, they drop another executable, and they start their process. It's at 12:54, so about 50 minutes later, there's the first execution of their encoded PowerShell command, Cobalt Strike, again, tools that the bad actors use. And the encryption, the first identified execution of the ransomware binary was about 11. So you have almost 12-hour time period from the time the email was clicked to the time that they start their encryption process from Monday going into Tuesday. Here's a rendition of what that document looked like from Cisco Talos. And just know a little bit about the psychology of the employee who clicked on this. I mean, you might look at that and go, well, gosh, why would I click on something that looks like that? Well, this employee was an employee who was already planning to separate from the organization because she was moving to Portland. She was going to get married and moving to Portland. She went up to HR and had a separation conversation that morning, and she saw bonus and thought, oh, well, they're giving me a bonus before I leave the organization. And here's the actual link. So this is the actual link. Again, from that they clicked on, and if you, it's a lot, but there's nothing in here that says, you know, bad actors out of the STAN nations that did this. We know exactly where they were located. This was just a Google Docs, a typical Google document that downloaded their payload. Here's a screenshot for you of what a server, you can go to a server and you can look, I'm sorry, it's a little bit blurry, but you can go to but you can see the .ryk and all of these files. So this is an actual screenshot from one of our servers, and just showing you what the files, you go into that server and you're going to just see .ryk on every single one of those servers. So interestingly, that week of October 26th, some of you may have sat on it. On October 30th, you can see on this image, Chime and HHS had said that there was an urgent threat to the health sector, and they were predicting about 200 hospitals. Now just imagine this happening across 200 hospitals in our country simultaneously. That would be unbelievable. But they had scheduled for that Friday, October 30th, a meeting. That week, 3 hospitals were in fact hit. One in New York, one in Virginia, and then us on the West Coast, all Ryuk ransomware. So the FBI had some credible threat. So let me talk, I've mentioned this a little bit to you about the perfect storm. and here's what it was. So you guys will appreciate this. In IT, we have way more work to do than the time we have to do it, than the people we have to do it, than the resources we have to do it, right? So I'm new in this organization I'm at right now, and guess what? We have more work to do. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough people. So we were right in the middle. We went from traditional compute network and storage with multiple vendors. We collapsed onto one platform for hyperconverged infrastructure. Great decision. But we happened to have a attack case in with Cisco at the time. We're using HyperFlex. And so we were already experiencing some slowness in the network. So when that first call came into Kevin, he assumed it was that. The second perfect storm here, and so that delayed his troubleshooting. The second perfect storm here was we were in the process, we were using Avanti for our endpoint protection. And we had an environment in our environment where half the organization was using Avanti and half we had just rolled out a Cisco AMP for endpoints, now called Cisco Secure Workload, but we had just rolled it out through the organization, but not configured. So we were in this little window in our process where we were, because understand this, rolling out our endpoint protection was one among 1,000 projects that we were doing. You guys can relate to this. Rather than having, a dedicated focus, really tried to move the organization to focusing on a bucket of projects, getting them done, and being more nimble and agile. We weren't there as a team yet. So we were deploying AMP for endpoints. So, and the reason that's important is we didn't have it configured. So when the bad actors came in, AMP saw that bad hash, but didn't stop it. So this is why we had this massive lateral spread, because we had a implementation that was partially done, that wasn't rolled out and fully configured for the rest of the rollout. So some initial challenges. So if these are things to think about. We're a Cisco shop at Sky Lakes. We're Cisco all the way through from the endpoint, core infrastructure, hyperconverged infrastructure, wireless. We've got their EAs. We're a Cisco shop. And when the event happened, I had our risk manager come down to my office and tell me to stand down. Because insurance was not going to allow, we could only use the vendors that were approved by insurance. So I went to my boss and said, wait a second, we're a Cisco shop. I have no idea who Kivu Consulting is. I don't know them. I don't have a relationship with them. They don't know our environment. I want Cisco Talos in here. So we went back and forth. And Cisco is such a partner, but the organization, so there was about a 24-hour period there that was really scary because I couldn't do what I needed to do for the organization because we were having this conversation between our attorneys and the insurance company on who we could use to help us get out of this. So know who if your insurance policy doesn't allow you to use the people that you're comfortable with, rewrite that policy. So what ended up happening is I went to our administration and said, look, Kivu, I don't know them. They don't know me. They don't know our environment. I need Cisco to help us. The first thing you're going to want to know as the CEO of the organization is who, what, where, how, why, and when. And if you want that answer, there's no one better to get that than Talos. So the senior team agreed because we had to make that investment. We knew that we weren't going to be reimbursed for insurance for that. That was just going to be a cost out of our pocket, but it was absolutely worth that cost. And I'll explain why here in just a minute. So we went forward, but now we had the challenge. If you're in leadership, you understand this. Now you have two people who are going to help you recover who does what. So we had to immediately establish who was going to do what. So we said, Talos, we want you to give us the forensics, give us the deep dive, tell us the root cause of what happened, and then tell us what we need to do to recover. Kivu Consulting, you're going to provide, literally, they had 25 FTEs that came in and helped us recover because we had to replace every PC in our hospital. I'll talk about that later. You're going to help us do the boots on the ground, frontline recovery of the system. And then we're going to have you also, we would like you also to do some forensics and you tell us where this came in and we're going to compare it to what Talos told us. By the way, only Talos was able to give us the deep forensics, just as a FYI. So what did we do to recover? So the first thing was shutting everything offline. So let me tell you why we made this decision. So at 1:30, we get the phone call. At 3:30, I get the phone call. So there's that period of troubleshooting. Kevin went, looked, he goes to our virtual environment, and the CPU is maxed on all the servers. And he's trying to figure out, well, what's going on? He associated it with that problem. I told you we had a ticket in with TAC at the time. He had associated with that. And then he was like, oh yeah, the nurse said that email was slow too. So he goes to the Exchange server. At the time, we were 2010 on-prem, because that was one of 1,000 projects we were working on, right? Getting off of Exchange on-prem and getting it to the cloud. So he goes to the Exchange server and he sees a README file. He looks at the README file and it's the bad actors. And here's all they said. They just said, you've been hit with Ryuk ransomware. Email us at this address. Boom, that was it. So that's when Kevin knew it was ransomware. So he called his boss, Nick. Nick was our manager of our infrastructure team. They get online, and by this time it's about 3:30 in the morning when they call me, and I'm like, we got to restore communications. We got to restore communications. If there's anything our clinicians need is the ability to communicate. So we use Vocera. If you're familiar with Vocera, the hands-free badge communication system, very good system. We use it robustly at Sky Lakes. So we're like, let's bring it back online. And we had 1 year before this event, went out and purchased a brand new backup and recovery system called Cohesity. We were using Commvault. We were Commvault customers for 10 years. And by God's grace, the year before, we replaced that. And by the way, Commvault is sitting completely encrypted as a memorial to us in our data center. Still, we had purchased Cohesity to replace Commvault. And the reason we made that change was not because we were buying cyber insurance, because that wasn't even on our mind. We made that change because I had Kevin, an engineer, spending all day managing backups. I go, Kevin, we have way too much work to do. I can't have you doing backups all day and managing backups. So we bought Cohesity, and then he spent 5 minutes a day and could do all the other work that I needed him to do. So we recover all of that to say we recover Vocera, put it back into our prod environment. Within 5 minutes, it's being encrypted. That's about 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, Nick, decision made, shut everything, everything's going offline. So we make that decision at 5:30. They walk into the data center, start powering everything offline. We had, like many of you, remember this time, this is October 26th of 2020. Do you guys remember what happened then? COVID, right? So in Oregon, that was our first round of COVID. We didn't start earlier in the year like many, like I think on the East Coast, it was January, February, March. For us, it was October, November, December, where we had opened new wings of the hospital, set up all the parking lot testing, all of those things that we all did as healthcare organizations, trying to take care of our communities. So this happens right at our peak. This happens right when we're getting our first snow in Klamath. And so all these things are kind of converging. So when we recovered Vocera and it was immediately encrypted, we went to shut down all systems. So we had a 8:15 standing huddle, which was a byproduct of COVID as well, that we had already set up, and we announced to the entire hospital at that point that we'd been hit with Ryuk ransomware, and that we're shutting every computer in the entire hospital off, and every system was going to go offline. So here's an actual text between myself and the CIO at Asante Health System, because we're a Community Connect. Asante Health System was hosting Epic for us. So I called Dr. Milligan. You can see 7:48 a.m. I called him probably about 7:30 in the morning. And he's like, John, tell me the name of the virus again. I say Ryuk ransomware, because I said, I'm like, Dr. Milligan, we have no idea what to do. So he was recommending some third parties that they had worked with Mandiant's FireEye and CrowdStrike. But so now we're disconnecting. I'm like, Dr. Milligan, disconnect us. We don't want you to be infected. We don't want you to be impacted. So we shut down all tunnels, no more citric acid. We shut down all access, all systems to Asante as the Community Connect, making sure that we weren't going to infect them. So we immediately stood up a command center. We took over on the second floor, our general education conference room and another meeting room. We established huddles every day from 8:15 and 5 p.m. The first 4 days we had 4 meetings a day, and we decided. And here's a wonderful thing: is the senior team at the hospital let me run this. They just said, John, do whatever you need to do. So having a point person that can lead this, make decisions, move the organization forward, and communicate. And so we made a decision right up front. We are going to be transparent. We are going to be brutally transparent and honest and exactly what's happening. And that paid massive dividends. We weren't only transparent. You guys just think about the Change Healthcare thing that happened. Now, if you talk to Change people, they feel like they were pretty transparent and communicated often. But what was our experience? Yeah, I see heads saying, no, we're in total agreement. So if I could have given them, I did text a few vice presidents and said, hey, I'm willing to give you, I would love to give you a word of advice, but that didn't happen. But, our attorneys get involved, but I'm telling you, transparency. So we put up on Facebook that we had been hit. We communicated with our patients when they walked into the hospital and said, hey, look, our systems are offline. We've been hit with ransomware. We're gonna take the best care of you that we can, given the circumstances that we're in, but we're gonna make sure that you're taken care of. And I think that paid huge dividends. We also had WebEx Teams. So the only technology we had running, and when I say only, I mean it, no ERP, no Epic, no email, no computer on, no server running. The only thing we had was our personal cell phones, and we had stood up WebEx because of COVID. So you guys remember, right? We had these in-person meetings, and all of a sudden we're having virtual meetings. So, but out of 1,700, 1,600 employees, we only had 50 people in the entire hospital on WebEx. And guess what? We couldn't add anybody to WebEx because we had to have their emails, and we had no email. So it was limited use, but people would huddle around phones for these huddles that we were doing for communication. So what system do you bring online first? So think about all the systems you're running. What would you bring online first? What do you have to have online? So here on the right side is an actual list. The first thing were the domain controllers, right? Active Directory. So this is literally a list of our and actually it's checkmarked where we were at the time when this happened. But how do you prioritize servers? So I want to give you something to think about here. So we're all clinical. Well, the facilities director came to me and said, John, it's snowing outside. We can't get people into the ED. We need our heated sidewalks. Johnson Controls is offline. We can't heat the sidewalks. So guess what? Johnson Controls all of a sudden moved up on the priority list in terms of, so you need to think about that as well. And mind you, we didn't have any thought of what this list, so we had to create, we did all of this in the moment. We didn't have any of this prepared. Here's another thing to think about. As we're bringing servers back online, we had to replace every PC, every Windows device, PC and server was encrypted in our. So here's what happened. The bad actors, when they got in, you guys saw that timeline, that 13-hour window. This is why we have to make your product lifecycle development is key. Our PAC system was managed by a vendor, and it was running an old OS with an old architecture with their own domain controllers, and the bad actors got in there. That's where they got their privileged access and then moved through our organization. They exploited an old OS and took advantage of that, and that's the reason for that. And so we had, and then you combine with that. Remember, I told you guys we put in Cisco on for endpoints, but it was not configured. So it was seeing it, but not stopping anything because it wasn't configured, right? And so that was the reason for the lateral movement. And so as we're bringing servers back online and we got that prioritization going, we got to roll out PCs in line. So as an example, when we brought up the first department we brought up, because cancer doesn't wait, was radiation oncology. You guys know radiation oncology are treatments over a series of time, over a period of days. And again, our patients have to drive a minimum of 72 miles. It's snowing. You got to go over the mountain pass if you're going to get that care. But when we bring up cancer treatment, the servers, guess what? We got to also bring up all the PCs. So we had to coordinate. This was our in-the-moment workflow. So we had hardware, infrastructure, imaging the PCs, and we make sure we documented and validated all this stuff before we but we had to coordinate that process. Okay, we're going to bring up cancer treatment center. Oh, we need 50 computers ready to go so that when that server comes online, we have those 50 PCs ready to go for that area. So here was the down and dirty on the Cisco side. So the first thing was we learned the people at Cisco are unbelievable. Those are incredible human beings. That's all I can say. Unbelievable. They told us exactly what we needed to do, how we needed it. I'll never forget our first meeting with Cisco Talos. We walked out of there because we know better, right? We walked out of there and we're like, oh, we can't rebuild. You know how many VLANs we have? We're not rebuilding them all. There's no way. Surely we can do this quicker. Because, of course, our passion was we got to get the system back online because these are patients' lives at stake. So we got to get our systems back online. No, we learned very quickly. We're going to do exactly what Cisco Talos says and in exactly the order they said. So here's what we did. We had our dirty environment, and then there was a staging, a middle environment, and there was a clean environment. And Cisco said, look, don't go out of the sequence. Don't step out of the lane, because if you do, you're going to reinfect prod, and we got to start all over again. So the first thing we did is we determined that our backups were clean. So we bought Cohesity for efficiency of use. What we got was ransomware protection. It worked flawlessly. And so we would restore from the clean backup into this middle staging area. We would do a full scan. The insurance required us to use Sentinel-1 as well for that scanning. We did full patching. And then we would move once that was certified that and documented that the scan was clean. We were fully patched. By the way, you guys will appreciate this. We had a time that every server and every PC in our organization was fully patched, 100%. It was at that moment. So we would move it into the clean environment, and then we would roll that out over time. So rebuilding a network, what do you got to do first? You got to have Active Directory and your domain controllers up and running, right? So that was, you can kind of see in the 1026 we go down. On 11/24, by 11/4, by November 4th, we had Active Directory rebuilt and the domain controls. So by 11/5, we were ready to start bringing systems back online. So here's a picture of the hallway of the PCs we had brought in. And at the time, as you can see here, we replaced about 680 Windows 7 PCs. So we got rid of that was the way we got rid of all of our Windows 7 PCs at the time. And so we either re-imaged or replaced every PC. And you can see 2,000 devices at 45 minutes to an hour and a half process to re-image all those PCs. It was both on-site and off-site PCs. So on the device side, we had deployed iPads where we could. We set up remote. So now in this case, think about this. Since we were Community Connect, Asante's still up and running, disconnected from us. But this was one of the huge learnings for billing, coding. We should have connected to them on the backside and use like Haiku and Canto. We didn't think about that till way late in the game. So now think about some other things to think about. Think about all your third-party systems. So Pixis, right? Or maybe you use Omnicell. Diagnostic imaging. Think about all the modalities, CT, MR, X-ray, ultrasound. We had to validate that those were all clean before we could bring them back on. Your smart pumps. So think of all the third-party systems you have running in your environment. And then when it comes to people, on the people side of this, we had to reset everyone's password. We took the opportunity at the time, we moved up to a minimum of 13 characters. So we had to have everybody in the organization change their passwords. Think about your other EMRs, right? So Epic was our primary EMR, but we used NetSmart at the time for home health. We use Electa, Mosaic for our medical and radiation oncology, and 150 other systems that we had. So the first system I mentioned to you that we brought back online was Electa. Cancer doesn't wait. We wanted to restore RayStation so that we could resume radiation oncology. So you can see the timeline on the right-hand side here. On 11/7, we had it brought back. It was available, but it didn't go into production use until 11/9. So this is the med tech in me, the FDA approval for blood bank systems, etc. We never restored a server and put it back into production. We restored it. We went in and validated it. We tested it. We documented that it was functioning, that it was working, and then we released it. So we had about a 48-hour window from the time that we would release servers to the time that we would document that they were working and functional, and then released to end users that everything was working as expected. Here's an example. This is what we sent out to all the vendors. Say, hey, you can reconnect. We're back online. This was just a screenshot. On the left side, you can see the Sentinel-1 scan showing that it's clean. You can see that Windows is fully up to date in the middle of the screen. On the right side is the attestation letter that we sent to every single vendor saying, hey, and again, we try to be as transparent as possible without giving too much information, but we let them know we've been hit and been breached, but we've cleaned our system. We've got a clean bill of health, and we sent that attestation so they could feel comfortable in reconnecting and supporting us. So think about this. This event happens. I call Dr. Milligan, the CIO at the time. He was the ED physician. Anyways, so he starts calling around the country, asking other Epic sites, what do you do? When's the right time to reconnect? How would you answer that question? When is the right time to reconnect? So in the middle of all this, we have to stand up a memorandum. We get our attorneys involved, and we're going back and forth on, we were ready to connect. I mean, I had hard, Dr. Milligan and I have a great relationship, but we were doing this. I appealed to the fact that he was a doctor. I go, Dr. Milligan, look, I'm a clinician by heart. We have to get these systems online for our patients. No, John, we got to make sure this is in place, this in place, this in place. So he was doing his homework. Of course, we were doing ours. So we actually stood up a memorandum of understanding, and it had 4 component parts, but here's the high level parts. Number 1, we had to attest from a third party that we're clean. Number 2, we agreed to annual risk assessments with pen testing, information that would be shared with them at an appropriate kind of board level. Number 3, you guys saw the text I sent him was about, I called him about 7:30 that morning, which technically we got notified at 1:30, so that's way too much time. In our MOU, we said within 30 minutes we'll contact them should something like this ever happen again. And then we agreed on a framework, and at the time it was NISB 2, that we were going to agree that was the framework we were going to work on in both organizations for security. So Epic. So think about Epic when you're going to bring Epic back online. So we were Community Connect. So the BCA, those are the business continuity access computers. The print servers go anywhere for all the file transfer, write faxing, and then of course Citrix to access it. Now think about all the third-party systems. So once we're ready to reconnect with Epic, you have no EMR, right? If your laboratory is not running. If you have no laboratory information system, if you can't have labs and RADs, there's 80% of your diagnosis. If you don't have radiology up and running, if you don't have pharmacy up and running, right, your Pyxis dispense. So these things, especially your integration engine, we use CorePoint, now Lineate, and they're now Rhapsody. Anyways, but think about all your third-party systems that have to be running simultaneously with Epic to make it work and function. So here is a picture of our go live plan. We had to provide Asante. This is a go live. We've been offline 23 days. So we had to provide a full go live plan. If you've been offline for 23 days, how do you transition all the patients in beds and get them back into the EMR? We had to repeat that. So I'll show you. So here's my office. Here's the whiteboard. These all happened real time. The left side is how are we going to cover our go live? So we were identifying people and who's going to do what. On the right side, this was all the third-party applications that we could identify that had to be up and running in order for Epic to function. So you can see nursing. So on the screen on the right, those categories. For nursing, I had to have cardiac monitoring up. That's Space Labs. Diagnostic imaging. I had to have our modalities connected. Pharmacy, I had to have Pyxis running. So I had to rebuild those servers, validate them, and have them in production use. Lab, we had Data Innovations, we had Roche, we had Rawls, we had Rimasol, our LabCorp, Mayo interfaces, our HIE connectivity, and then on the right side are the actual servers to support that. Here's a little. This is an amazing story. So right in the midst of all this, so if you have to travel 72 miles, the shortest distance, to oncology, or think of diagnostic imaging, your modalities, ultrasound, CAT scan, X-ray. But what does a radiologist have to do if there's no PACS? How do you read images? You have to go to the modality, right? So the radiologist has to be on site, has to go to the modality to read it. Guess what we learned? Each of those modalities starts to cache those images, and it has limited storage. Now you're burning CDs, right? Because this is filled up. And you're not getting full fidelity of all the tools we use, and we use PACS to read those. So we're impacting patient care. So what I knew was there's no way we called our vendor, and it was going to be 3 months to stand up to build out a new PACS and have it up and running. 3 months. So we're going to provide no imaging for 3 months. So on Thursday, I call a trusted colleague in the industry. He had worked in the PACS. He sold the PACS system. He worked at AGFA when I was at LC 20 years earlier. And I called them and I go, tell me who the players are. And so he said, Visage, Sectra, and then our incumbent vendor. So I called Visage on a Thursday. I call Sectra, and it was Electromech at Dan Toma, the VP there. I get a hold of them. I talk to them Thursday and Friday and say, I need a proposal by Monday morning at 9 a.m. and I want to put in a brand new PACS. I can't wait 3 months. How soon can you do it for us? So Visage is an all online system, so you could imagine that could be stood up relatively quickly. Sectra was not. It was an on-prem only. So I worked with them through the weekend. We had conversations on Monday at 2 o'clock. I meet with our radiologist and executive team, say, here's our 3 vendors. Here's what it's going to cost. We choose Sectra, Electromech. They did not have a single system on the planet that was running in the cloud. They went and stood up the entire infrastructure in the cloud for us. So Monday, we signed no contracts. It's all verbal. I go, Dan Toma, I go, Dan, we're going to do this. We don't have time to sign contracts. This is where people matter. This is the people part of the story. Dan, we don't have time to, you and I are going to agree to some things in this process, in this journey, and our word is going to be our bond. So they go stand this up in 3 days. They stand up this entire system in the cloud for us. So Monday, I give the verbal go ahead. On Friday, we're live on Sectra PACS. Dr. Bauman calls me at noon, says, John, I'm looking at a CT. I'm by the pool right now, and I'm looking on a seat. I don't know what he was doing at the pool at the time outside. It was October and it was starting to snow. But anyways, he goes, John, I just want you to know I'm looking at a CT on my iPad 1 week. Here's what's even more remarkable about this story. We used Immodal, 3M. They just changed their name to Solventum, I think. But Fluency for Imaging, I called the vice president at 2 o'clock in the morning. His name's Russ. I go, Russ, we've been hit with ransomware. We're putting in a brand new PACS. I need you to integrate reporting into the system, and we need to do it in like 3 to 4 days. He goes, okay. And he did it. He mobilized. So when we went live on Friday, we had PACS up and running. That weekend, Saturday, we turn on all their reporting. So they're able to do all their reporting. And on Monday, listen to this, we had a full RIS running. Sectra not only put in their PACS, installed it in the cloud that they had never done before, they brought in a company called Abadox, because how do you schedule your patients? So think about the whole radiology workflow, right? So until we bring everything back online, we were able to stand up a full solution in 1 week. We were scheduling patients. We had the full risk workflows. And when we went live on November 18th with the EMR, we also they built out. So this is in my office. The left side is the actual HL7, what we're going to do between Abadox and Sectra and Epic. And on the right was just when we started drafting how the messages and how this is all going to work. It was amazing. So this is a story about people. So your vendor relationships, those partners that you have, can you call them at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, I need your help? So here's our team. So this room, this picture on the right is our nurses and doctors. We're rekeying. We're getting ready to go live. You can see them all wearing their masks because we're right in the middle of COVID. But we're getting ready to go live on Epic. So we had to rekey all the patients that were in beds. So here it is, finally, Epic offline 23 days. We go live Wednesday, November 18th at 10:30 p.m. Email was not restored for another 30 days later and to a pilot group only. And it was about 30 days before we actually got access to our personal drives. Again, this was before we were in the cloud. So listen to this. I share this with you. Chris Van Gorder at Scripps, when they had their outages, they were in the May about a year after us. Look what he said. So he said this in an article. This was also in Becker's. Using our manual systems for a couple of hours was one thing. It's another altogether to do it for days. If you walk out, if this hour and a half we have here together, if you walk out of here just knowing that the greatest challenge is that your downtown processes will work for the first 24 hours, for the first 48 hours, but they break down after that. When you're on total paper, those processes do not work. So here's a couple quotes in the San Diego Union Tribune from some nurses that we feel like we're playing with our license. Exactly the conversation. Christy Wiles was the head nurse at the hospital. She goes, John, when you take, especially a new nurse who's come out of school, never worked on a paper system before, when you look at that piece of paper, you're thinking, what am I missing? Oh gosh, I can't do the 5 rights checking when I give this medication. All those things, the stress it causes. And this was on top of COVID. Another nurse said at Scripps, everything had to be double and triple checked. Yeah, that's exactly why we put IT systems in for efficiency, and we're totally reliant on human processes. So here's an example of innovation from our nurse informaticist team. Christy Wiles in one of our huddles says, John, we're going to harm a patient because we have to write out the MARs every day, every shift. We're writing everything. We need labels. We need the ability. So I got our nurse informaticist team together and said, guys, lock yourself in a room, innovate. By the way, that's our internal mission statement for IT is we save lives and we innovate, and in that order. This is about patient care and we innovate. That's what we do. So they got in a room, and so we took our computers that were offline, we attached a printer to them, they built an Excel spreadsheet, and they started automating some of those processes for them in Excel. We started printing labels, doing all those kind of things. So that was the kind of innovation. All right, I'm going to move to impacts. I'm going to move to, okay, so what does all this mean? You and I we get to have the joy, the honor, and privilege when we get out of bed in the morning and we come to work. We're in healthcare IT. We're not making widgets. We get to impact people's lives. And in your community, in our community here and at Sky Lakes, that can be our family member, that's our neighbor, that's our friend in the hospital. So what is the impact of losing systems for 23 days? So Ron Woida, the VP of Patient Care, CNO at Sky Lakes, said this, and I love it. He says, John, we've worked downtime out of our processes. We've worked downtime out of our processes. So we're now at a point where 72 hours in, everything breaks down. Epic had their BCA. We had the MAR, but you get 72 hours later, your MAR is no longer relevant, right? It's all on paper. The workflows between lab, pharmacy, diagnostic imaging, the orders. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and you'll see what his statement means. So think about the clinical impacts, the medical record. So a patient comes into the ED, and normally you would have a next of kin. If that person can communicate well, Dr. Niskanen, our Vice President of Medical Affairs, talked about his experience of going down the ED, seeing a patient, and saying, oh gosh, I have no patient history. I don't know their med allergies. I don't know their allergies. I don't know their previous medical history. So they're now having to give care without access to all that information, right? Think about how simple it is in the ED. Our tube system, I'm sure you guys have tube systems where you transport your tubes or your blood collection right up to the lab. Guess what? We've worked downtime out of the process. We don't have unit secretaries. We don't have runners anymore in our organization. We don't have unit secretaries on med-surg that would used to handle all those paper orders. How are we going to do that now? We're back in a paper world. So we've worked downtime out of our processes. So we had our financial, anybody who couldn't use the system, we redeployed them through the organization to help with running specimens, moving orders, even stat orders, running paper, because, okay, what's the, the cockroach that's going to survive the nuclear war is faxing, right? So in IT, I'm just saying it. I thought, shoot, man, faxing's our backup. Copper line faxing, that's going to solve all our problems. It didn't work. It totally collapsed. We had 2 fax machines in the ED. One of them literally burned up. But when you start getting 100 orders coming in and stats from the ED, from the ICU, from med-surg, from all these areas, guess how long? It can take an hour to get a fax from the ED into the lab because they just start backing up, slowly going through the process, totally broke down, right? So we relied for communication. We still had whiteboards in the patient rooms. That became a lifesaver for us. The greatest confusion when we did our, when we went and did one-on-ones with all the departments, with lab, rad, and pharmacy, imaging, the communication between those departments, we relied on cell phones. So first of all, we had to get everybody's cell phone number right, and we were texting. And then, that wasn't even a great way to communicate, because do you guys have dead spots in your hospital? So remember, everything's offline. We have dead spots, right? Where so it was not ideal, but it's what we relied on. So paper. Do you have enough prescription pads for an extended outage for your for prescription for your pharmacy? We didn't. Toner for your copy machines. We went to Staples, Walmart. We bought out all the paper. Literally, we bought all the paper and toner and stuff in town because we didn't have enough. Think of that documentation. Now you got med students and students that have come through the system that have never used paper systems. They've used only electronic. And if you don't capture the right signatures, diagnosis, dates on every page, you can't bill for the work that you're doing, right? So there's all these, and then I'll just point out one more, massive backlog of paper. So think about your laboratory results. Your laboratory results are most valuable when you can trend them over time. And you can't scan a lab result in as a JPEG and trend them. We had to rekey all of that information. So back entry. So think about one more item here on the effect. So you're not billing, right? Think of your supply chain. Any electronic supply chain, your stuff is broken, is not working. You're sending no bills out, you're receiving no invoices. Think about your data continuity. So all the reporting measures that you do for regulatory reasons and for CMS payments, you're gonna have a gap in time because that data is not in the system, right? So you have these reporting gaps as a result of that time. So we had potential loss of data. Here's where we ended up as an organization. We had 40 terabytes of images over a decade of time, 1.5 million studies. At the time, we were not backing up. We had everything in our organization backed up on Cohesity except imaging, because that was being handled by the vendor. And we had 1.5 million between primary and archive. So here's the power. When we made that decision at 5:30 in the morning to physically power off every server, we shut down these PAC servers, imaging servers, in the middle of processing. And that lone act saved us. So there are 1.5 million studies. We ended up losing 763. Again, we're grateful. The technologies that bad actors used, I'm sure it's changed. In 2020, encrypting is a very slow process. So that act of powering that device off saved us. So guess what we had to do for those 140 images we lost? We had to go back and clinically review every one of them to make sure we didn't have to bring the patient back in, rescan them. In this case, all 140 were very old images and had no clinical impact, no bearing. So we were very, very thankful for that. Notice, so same thing with cath lab images. Notice on the right side of the screen, our Stanley Health AeroScout we use for temperature monitoring. We lost a segment of data as well because of that. So what are the financial impacts? So here's our operations. So on the left side of the screen, you can see our AR is at 56.2 on the right side of the screen. So on October 25th, we're at 56.2 days. On Friday, April 23rd, we're at 178 days in our AR. Cash flow. This is where days of cash on hand become meaningful. So you can see in this slide here, the dip of our cash. So our outstanding claims dropped from 30 days to 4.6 in 1 month. So this is a timeline. Hal Perlman is the director of financial services there. So he gave this to me, but so he laid out on the 25th, things are normal. On the 26th, so from the 26th to the 17th, there's no activities. There's no billing, no follow-up, no posting, no customer statements. On the 18th, Epic comes online. On the 23rd, we start posting resumes. On the 28th, we do our first post-disaster claim run. And you can see it's not until March 19th that we do the remaining disaster claims are finally released. So this is Hal's advice. First action to take. Hey, I need to get on the phone and contact the payers to let them know we're offline. Oh, oops, I don't have access to Outlook. I have no contacts. So Hal now has a Rolodex on his desk with that information. So here's his Rolodex slide. So you might ask, if Epic was restored on the 17th, why didn't billing resume until the 28th? And here's why. So we had to reestablish the interfaces for billing. We had the charge capture was a month of backlog and had to all be rekeyed into the system, right? Had to all, and then on the coding side, our encoder was another system, 3M, that had to be re-enabled. So here's the critical finding. You see at the bottom of this slide, many of our clinical staff had never documented on paper. So we couldn't bill, we couldn't code correctly because information was missing. So those that's a tough one. Even if you train people on downtime processes, you don't know when you're going to be down, and ultimately that is going to be lost. So the unintended opportunity from January to the end of March, we had 2 groups of claims. So now you double the work on the financial side, right? They got to get everything caught up, plus what's resumed at the time. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up for us here. So here was some of the strategic recommendations, and this was actually a slide from Cisco Talos. Number one, at the time, we didn't have multi-factor authentication in place, so I think most of us have that now. Secondly, was having a 24/7, 365 eyes on the network MDR, XDR solution, and then a SIM, centralized log repository for median, having an incident retainer, which we did going forward, and then playbooks, developing playbooks and security awareness program. So once again, you can see here by May, we're back down. Our AR days were back to about 66, and they eventually got down below 50. So we recovered all systems from Cohesity. For us, it was about 650 servers, 150 applications, and so by March we had most systems online. And then 6 months so it took us about 6 months to bring everything back online. So all the billing done, bringing every system online, all the medical records pieces complete. So how do we prevent this? So a couple things to think about. And so when I started to think about how do I boil, what did I learn, and how do I boil this down? So we can avoid the threat of encryption with good backups. But on the other side, we can prevent the threat of exfiltration. So that was key for us. Cisco Talos was able to tell us we had no exfiltration. Otherwise, we would have been double blackmailed. Once we knew we could recover from Cohesity, we said we're not interacting with, we are not going to talk to the bad actors. We're not going to have any conversation with them. We talked to the FBI. They agreed. So if you've got good backups, you can avoid that encryption problem. If you've got eyes on your network, you can avoid the exfiltration. The reason I say that, you guys remember that slide I showed you? We had about a 13-hour window we could have intervened. From the time they got in to the time they encrypted, that was about 13 hours. And you guys know that's one of the tactics of the bad actors, right? They get in and they remain silent. And so the 24/7 eyes on the network is the MDR piece. And then of course, education, the first line of defense is our people. So I'm a picture person. So the way we avoid encryption is through our having good backups. The way we avoid extortion is preventing this happening with an MDR. Couple other things. I mentioned it earlier. I mentioned about the partnerships, strategic partnerships. I can't say enough about this. That's why I'm a big believer in building relationships with people. I tell vendors, I don't need a vendor-client relationship. I need a solutions partner. I need somebody who's going to, healthcare is way too tough. Our budgets are way too thin. I need somebody who's going to understand our organization, believe in the mission and vision we have for our communities, the regional area we take care of, and partner with us in that journey. And when it comes time to doing hard things like this, being willing to jump in and help us. So we did do a playbook. So we went after the event. People have good intentions. I'll give you an example. Christy Wiles, she had a whole stack of paper shoved into a drawer of all the things that she wanted to do if there's ever an extended outage. What life goes on, right? You get through this, life goes on. It's just past memory. So what we did is I went to my boss and said, I would like an FTE to go in and capture all this. Take a year to really document this. Didn't get the FTE, so I went back to my team and said, I know we're busy. I took our project management team. Let's take a couple of hours every week and start meeting with every department in the hospital and putting together a playbook. While this is recent memory, let's document. And the purpose of the playbook isn't to give an extended process, but it's to provide nuggets that should we ever go down and we know it's going to be an extended outage, oh yeah, do this, do this, do this, do this, get the paper, put this up. So we innovated. They came up with ways to do the paper process better over that 23-day period. Let's take those learnings, encapsulate them, and have them up front so that we can be way more efficient right from the start should something like this ever happen again. And by the way, imagine where we would have been at if this would have been some kind of natural disaster and we had no cell phones. Then we'd have no communication. So what would we do differently? So I mentioned to you guys that communication is absolutely number one. We set up a command center. We were transparent. That was good. However, this was a learning for me. We should have also focused when we had those meetings, not only on the IT challenges, but we should have had the operations teams talking about their barriers. So for an example, the communication that needed to happen between the ED and the laboratory, or between the ED and diagnostic imaging, when those faxes and the stat faxes weren't going, it's running up there. Why haven't you guys come down and gotten this lab? We faxed this an hour ago, right? And the lab's sitting there going, it hasn't come through yet. But having intentional conversation, not only about what's happening in the plan, here's where we're at in the process. For me, it was those first 5 or 6 days where I stood in front of the hospital 4 times a day and said, our next step is getting Active Directory online and the domain controllers, because if we don't have those, we don't have a network. And then the next meeting, I had to say that for multiple days. It was very, very hard to say because it took us that time to do that build and to make that happen. But having an intentional part of that conversation be lab and ED, lab and ICU. What are the barriers that you're having in communication in the paper process, those kind of things. Start back entry as soon as possible. So as soon as you can start back entry, we waited we were like probably 15 days in. We went to the local college across the street. We got on their computers. Since this was a unique situation, the EMR is technically up at Asante. So Asante gave us access to their system. So we started rekeying. We went over to the college. We had people starting to back enter before we went live. So that was an opportunity because we were in that, because we're in the Community Connect model. And then finally, if we can, maybe one of you guys can figure this out, and then you can retire. But we need communication platform that is immutable. Now, I would argue that there's no immutable platform. There's only one who's immutable, and that's God. But we do really need a platform. What the one message I got from nursing was, John, we as nurses, we can innovate, we can take care of our patients. But if you can give me the ability to communicate with doctors, respiratory therapy, with the lab, if I can communicate, we can take very good care of our patients, even if we don't have an EMR. So I'm still working on that. I keep pushing Vocera to find a way that we can make sure we have Vocera always available. Here's a couple nuggets for you guys, just to know. This was probably some of the premier advice we got from Kivu Consulting. They came in, we're sitting there, like we're sitting at the table, right? All of us IT, the first day, a Kivu consultant comes on site. We're going to knock this out. We're going to, we stayed up for like 3 days without sleeping. And they said, no, you guys need to go home and sleep. This is going to be a marathon. This is not a sprint. And we're like, oh, okay. So we'd work our 18, 19-hour days after that, and then we'd go home and sleep for a few hours and come back. Rebuilding a network's harder than you think, and it's more work than you think. Back entry takes more time than you think, and it requires more people. An example, we had to hire 3 people for 6 months to rekey our laboratory. We had 6 file cabinets of all of our results that we had to rekey, and it took them 6 months, 8 hours a day. Prioritization may not be what you think. Again, locked in, come from a clinical background. As I told you guys the story of Johnson Controls, having to think about some of those other systems that have to be prioritized. Having a retainer, so if something like this happens, you've got the forensics expertise, unless you feel like you have those people on your team. Sometimes, though, in those circumstances, under the stress, it's good to have a third party, a third set of eyes. Cisco Talos was just unbelievable. Backup processes work well for the first few days, then they break down. Again, if you leave with one thing, I would like for you to leave with that. And again, we work downtime out of our processes. So if the approach of your organization is, look, IT is an expense center, remove all your IT systems and you'll find out real quickly it's not just an expense, it's an efficiency. Those investments we've made in IT for all these years, guess what? That's why we don't have unit secretaries on every floor moving the paper. That's why we don't have reams and reams of charts sitting in a room somewhere that HIM has to recover every time a patient comes into the ED. I mentioned this already. This is my personal opinion. Transparency and communication. And the reason we're having this conversation today is we don't want another healthcare facility in the country to go through this. We're family. You all take care of your community. You do IT in your community. You're going to work to make a difference for your community. The noble work that you're doing, just like we're doing here. And if I can leave you with any nuggets that could better prepare you, should you guys be in an extended outage, then we've accomplished what we need to accomplish. So then from an IT perspective, we use KnowBe4. You guys may use the same thing, right? We got really aggressive afterwards. We really ramped up IronPort for email filtering. We did 2FA after that. And then, believe it or not, it took me 3 years. I got to be careful how I say this, but it took us 3 years to actually get the hospital to approve a MDR. I thought it was going to be a no-brainer, right? So we went out to the market. We looked at 9 systems. It was going to cost Sky Lakes between $100,000 and $700,000 a year, depending on which system you chose for the 24/7, 365 eyes on the organization. It took 3 years before we got it approved. We live in this world where budgets are budgets. The 1% to 3% margin in standalone not-for-profit hospitals is real. But I'll tell you, when we got this, our Kevin Crowder, the guy who received that first phone call, he started sleeping better at night, knowing that someone else had eyes on the network when he was sleeping. So we did get AMP for endpoint configured properly, which you would expect, right? We did that with Cisco Talos. We made a lot of firewall changes, really built, culture, security first mindset. That's from leadership all the way through the organization. And we fine-tuned all of our tools, Umbrella, StealthWatch, with Cisco. All right, so I know I've taken a lot of time. I think if we have time, I'm willing to take. So I was not able to see the chat while we were talking, but I'm happy to entertain any questions. I think we have a little bit more time, right, Cheryl? I think we blocked till 30. Yeah, so perfect. We got 25 minutes. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have. And then so go ahead.
I was going to say, take a deep breath. Thank you so much. I think a lot of us were doing a little texting. I think we watched our IT version of Scared Straight.
We have a poll of how many antacids folks need at this point, and I think we're going to need to buy stock. And
yeah. So it blows me away, like the fact that. Well, I'll just say, here's what it drove me to. the American Hospital Association right now has a consultant working for them, John Riggy, who the AHA hired him to help drive cybersecurity and really push Congress to think differently about this. I went to John and I go, John, how is it that you expect a standalone not-for-profit hospital to compete against nation-state actors? Mm-hmm. So some of you on your team at Midland, you may have come to work and you're retired or you served our nation. You did the noble call and served our nation and we're in the military. But right now you're not wearing that uniform, but you're coming to work and you're being called upon to ward off nation-state actors who want to take your health system. That's just not right, right? So the good thing was through conversations with John, he really started to do that. He said these need to be seen as threat crimes. This needs to be seen as, you know, if you're like our hospital, you can't divert, right? There's not another ED across town. We're it. Same thing here with the hospital I'm in right now, San Juan Regional. We're right in the Four Corners area, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, and Colorado. And you got to drive a long ways to get healthcare. We can't divert. So these kind of things are serious. And so I keep hoping that our government will take these as you know, threats of war to the core infrastructure for our nation. Here's the other side of that coin. And I've said this, had a chance to do a few podcasts, and I've said if anybody's listening to this and you're a bad actor, you're making money off this, you're exploiting healthcare for your gain and putting people's lives at risk. That's insane. And here's why it's insane. Guess what? You might be 25 right now or whatever, how old you are, but you're going to need healthcare at some point. The very people that you're exploiting are the people that your life is going to be dependent on. So just like within the prison system, there's certain areas you don't cross, certain lines you don't cross. This should be a line of human decency where we say, like, you know what, maybe the medical record is rich for exploitation in terms of money and selling, but I'm not going to cross that line because we're talking about humanity. We're talking about all of us need healthcare. So let's not cross that line. So it just shows you the level of depravity where people's minds are, right? They'll do even things that harm humanity and exploit people for their benefit, which is really, really sad.
Hey, John, one of the things you mentioned at the beginning in this organization, we have a lot of this going on because everybody's got their priorities, is finishing projects. So we have some MFA stuff in the works. We are rolling out CrowdStrike for endpoint protection. We're cleaning up our Active Directory, you know, all the good hitters. I think between that and optimizing the tools that are in place, I think those are some of the things that we have a lot of building blocks. If we put the recipe together and actually get them done, that would be good. How many actions did you have in place that had you wished they would have been done before you ran into, you know, click for the bonus?
Yeah, so just one, right? If when we did our endpoint, so like you guys are doing the same thing. You're rolling out CrowdStrike. I mean, the learning for me was I can't expect our engineers to do 50,000 things. So, and I'm going to speak frankly here. So I've come into an organization now at San Juan where they had no CIO for about 2 years. So there's no leadership. So I'm coming into a situation where every system is exactly that, half-baked. There's shadow IT. There's people running IT all through the organization because there was no centralized leadership, right? And this is very, very concerning. When I was at Sky Lakes, we found a way to, on the EMR side, be very effective. So I'm going to answer your question now. So when you think about the bucket of work that has to happen within infrastructure, so like you're saying, endpoint, CrowdStrike, any number of things that you need to do. And on the EMR side, we were able to take that and say, we're going to concentrate on 3 at a time. And we're going to it's going to be a revolving door. As soon as we get one done, we're going to move another one in. So we ended up doing that with Asante. We had like 14 projects at a time going on the Epic side. And we said, no more, we're done. we're going to do 3. We're going to have these others sitting out here. We're going to understand the risk. They're going to be lower priority, but we're going to focus on the 3 and get them done. And as soon as one drops off, we move one in. We ended up getting 12 to 14 projects done annually compared to having 14 going and getting 3 done annually. So I go, you know, it's not rocket science. Maybe I need to apply that on the infrastructure side. And I'll just tell you, we didn't get there, and it's because I'm just going to say this, and this is my opinion, we're under resourcing the engineering capacity to do that. So on the engineering side, you've got your new projects, you've got your product lifecycle development, and then third category is that break fix. And here's what happens. Tier 1 goes to solve a problem they can't. It ends up going to an engineer who's either doing those new projects or product lifecycle. They step out of it. You step out of your CrowdStrike implementation to take care of this fire over here. So I have an opportunity right now at San Juan, and hopefully we can accomplish this. But I'm going to be very, very intentional about building a buffer. And if this works, I can let you guys know, but I want to build a buffer zone of engineers. I want some support engineers that when they come to work, they either rotate through this or it's their focus. They're fighting those fires so that I can have my new projects and life cycle focus for the engineers focus on that. So like your endpoint CrowdStrike, the organization should say, you know what, we're going to put some things on hold to get that done, because we don't want to be in the middle. You guys are putting CrowdStrike endpoint detection for a reason. You're making a huge investment. So we have to say as an organization, that's important to us. So we're going to focus resources here and let's focus on getting this done. That was the exact issue. We would not have had the lateral movement that was a simple, literally simple configuration in Cisco that would have stopped this dead in its track. And we know it because we've had multiple bad actors have gotten in, but we've stopped them. We've already seen it since our outage. So we're in this together. We're family. If we figure this out, we need to share it with how do we, I don't know of an IT organization on the infrastructure side that we've been able to move infrastructure to a model where we're using a lean process, where we've got core, high value, high risk projects that we need to do from an infrastructure perspective. We're saying, okay, Jason, I don't know what you do. You happen to be on my screen here, but Jason, I'm just going to say you're an engineer. And Jason, if you could come to work and know that you have 3 things you're focused on, or 2 things, or maybe it's the CrowdStrike project, and you're going to do that intense. If you could give 40 hours a week to CrowdStrike, imagine where you could go with that. The reality is you're doing a gazillion things, right? And then someone says something breaks and you're stepping out of your project work to go over here to fix because the doctor can't do something. And they're real crises. They're real things that need to be fixed, but we're not staffing and resourcing IT to fill that middle gap. In my opinion, at Sky Lakes, when I left there, I was 2 FTE short of having a perfect team. And it was those 2 engineers that sit between tier 3 and tier 1. I'm just speaking out of experience. So I have the opportunity now here at San Juan that's what I'm going to propose to the organization. I'm going to be a little bit high on the engineering side, but I'm going to be very purposeful in that. And if it works, I can let you know. But I think that's the biggest problem we have in IT is we need to allow our infrastructure team to, I think, move in that agile model. And if you're always pulling them out to fight the fires, then I just think we're going to continue in our chaos. And it's exactly that way right now. IT Works runs our IT for us here at San Juan. So I just, believe me, this is like the weirdest thing I've experienced in my life. I come in the organization, I log into Workday and I go to the org chart and there's 1 FTE at San Juan for IT and it's me. Everything is outsourced. Outsourcing has its place, but so I am now going to be going through a project of strategic insourcing to try to get this figured out. But I'm hoping in that plan to build in, back to your point, Cheryl. So you are making this investment in CrowdStrike. I think as an organization, you got to say, okay, we know these 100 things need to be done, but if we can move into a model where where we can say the engineer, this is what I want you to focus on for your 40 hours. I think we could just get a lot more done. Sorry, that was a long answer to that question, but.
No, and it's perfect. So then the follow-up with that is, so Bart is our director of technology, and one of the things he continues to say is we've been going through, building our playbooks, really Active Directory first, so at least we're smart on that. One of the things is in our designs, not design disaster recovery, design failover, so that we don't have to go through that business continuation, downtime, et cetera. And for things as simple as, hey, our circuits, we have different, different providers, just kind of like all the hosting companies do, right? And in Midland, just like where you are at, there aren't that many choices, right? So making sure we're doing that. But I think it's in all of our system design and our system choices as we pick these SaaS vendors, as we pick some of these other things moving forward, is we're designing for the future. But the future, it's not only what the product can do, it's how does it stay up when something happens?
Yes, that's exactly right. So there's a question here Daniel had. He says, you mentioned Cohesity for server backups. However, what about switch and router backups? This would have possibly made bringing up the VLANs a bit quicker. I think you're on to something there, Daniel. And I don't know how we handled that. It's actually a question nobody's asked.
You can back up switches and routers to Orion. That's the tool we use. It'll back it up. It'll back up your data.
We just have to make sure we do it.
Right. Yeah. But if you're going to build up new clean VLANs like y'all did, it helps. But again, you're not just going to restore them. I think what y'all did from what your presentation was, you built out a new network clean. So
yes.
Yeah, that's almost like, do you want to build a plan to be prepared for a cyber event, to have that plan pre-built? There's just a lot of work, to your point about having engineering support, but that would be a great, way to be prepared. That's pretty, that was something I never heard before. That's really interesting and really appreciate that.
Yeah. So one of the things we discovered, we didn't know it. Cohesity actually has a Active Directory backup that literally goes to the attribute level. So when we recovered Active Directory from Cohesity at the attribute level. Unbelievable tool, and that was just a tool set within that we did not know about. So Jason, lessons learned on Gaede. So I just have to say this. So I had a college roommate from Texas. His name was Jason Ewing, spelled exactly the same as yours. You don't happen to be that. I don't see on the camera. I don't see you.
And Jason's our CIO. So
okay. So Jason, where are you from?
Yeah, sorry, I've got to figure out, maybe somebody on this call can instant message or Teams me or something and tell me how to get rid of my dang green screen that I can't get rid of even when I try to change the settings. So you're going to see a big green box.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, Idaho, Utah areas.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So you're a different Jason, same name. So nice to meet you. So he said, what lessons learned on gaps in processes? So the first one, I'd say the biggest takeaway in gaps in a process is that assuming that our downtime processes work. They did work, again, for 24, 48 hours. But when you get beyond that, all of your downtime forms, the education around it, what I need to do, what a physician, what a provider who's never used a paper system needs to document in order to get paid when it's on paper, right? So that there were massive gaps in that extended downtime process. And on documentation in particular, so here's two sides of the coin. One side is we didn't even have an idea of what system we were going to bring on. We did that in a moment, right? It would have been good to have a good solid list. These are things that just get buried in all of our work, but a good solid list of every application we have, And what bucket do they fall in terms of prioritization? We didn't have that on the IT side. We didn't have that laid out, and so Skylakes has that now, but we didn't have it at the time. And then what was the timeline for notifying OCR, and what was the collaboration for response with the vendor, insurance forensics, and legal input? So I can't recall what exactly the timeline, but we did. Is it 30 days, 60, 90 days? But we did. We contacted them, and we went under an investigation. And when I left there, gosh, this is 3 years later, they hadn't even closed it out. We gave them all the information. Oh, here's huge. This temp turned out to be invaluable. So we were certified by DNV. It turned out to be invaluable for DNV and the OCR. We had detailed. So what I did is I took a staff member, and I said, you're going to be, just take notes. So when I was in the room, and we were directing, okay, here's what we're doing today. Here's what we're going after. This team's doing this. This team's doing this. We were documenting what we were doing. So all the way through the process, when we got done, we had this 90-page document that kind of was a chronology and documentation of what we did. When OCR came in and said, show us what you guys did, we just went here. So we didn't have to go recreate that. That was absolutely huge. So just having someone that can document that process for you, that turned out to be a huge win for us. So we did. So just so you guys know, we were insured at about 2 million, and our CEO, their best estimates, this was a $10 million hit to the organization. So a huge delta. So when you want to talk about, why do I want to put in CrowdStrike, and why do I want to have an MDR, or this is, I met with the board last night and said, I'm so sorry that we live in a world now. I was kind of laying out my philosophy. This is the first opportunity to speak to the board, and just saying, here's how we're going to do IT going forward. But one of the points I made was, we have this new slice of the pie when you think about everything we have to do in IT, and it's called cybersecurity. 10 years ago, we didn't have to worry about that. We were spending our money on MRIs, new carpet, new technologies, et cetera. But going forward, we have to carve out a portion of our budget dedicated to cybersecurity. It's got to be its own bucket outside of everything else, because we are called upon to stand against nation state actors and do everything we can. And on the other side of the coin, we don't want to be foolish to think that we can outspend the bad actors, because look at change. Imagine what change budgets are around people, process, and technology for security. So no organization is too big to get hit, because again, it's people, process, technology. So we don't want to take that to an extreme, but we just need to realize that that we do need to make investments there. So then, was your incident command able to help with prioritization process? So I'll just say this. So we were the incident command. The senior team basically were just on the sideline, and we did that process. So the answer is yes. Incident command was us, and we did that prioritization. Of course, a lot of people have opinions when you bring in all your business owners. This is where any leader just has to make decisions. But when you bring your business owners in, their system is the most important. And the fact of the matter is, like an OB, so family birthing center, are you able to safely take care of your patients? Yes, you are. Okay, then that system's not going to be at the highest, right? If we start, of course, with patient safety, what's going to have the most dramatic. So as an example, the first system we brought online, we chose to bring online, was radiation oncology. Because if that LINAC isn't up and running and dispensing radiation to patients, we're putting patients' lives at risk. So it was definitely prioritized of everything else. And then how soon was incident command established? So we stood it up. We hijacked the standing 8:15 daily huddle as a meet. So our incident command was stand up immediately. I mentioned we picked a room in the hospital where we set up incident command. It was a big enough room that we could have like IT people working. We were managing, making decisions around incident command, but we could all be in a room to communicate together. And as people, so here's another thing Cohesivity did for us. So think about this. So nursing came in, walked in and said, hey, we need this policy on how to do this process X. It's affecting patient care. We need this policy so we can give it to our nurses, so that this procedure, so they know the correct process to do this for our patients. So Corey was our engineer, who was our, we like to say it's an internal joke, but Cohesity was so easy that even Corey could use it. But Corey would go in and was able to pull out of Cohesity like a single Word document, a single Excel file, find them very rapidly, pull them out of the barrage of information that we had backed up. So that was another thing we were able to do during that 23-day outage. As people, once we brought the system back online, had Active Directory and domain controls going, we were able to go in there and specifically pull out specific policies, spreadsheets, whatever it was that people needed, until we restored their access to their personal drives.
John, I think we're kind of at time with you, and I know we've gone through it. Shanity, anything else?
No, thank you for your time. I think that this was painful, but it was helpful to hear your process and your resiliency through it, and gives us a lot to think about as we move forward.
We have a lot of parallel situations that you have, a lot of parallel systems and all of that. So for everybody on this call today, it was extremely valuable to help us really understand what's in it for me when it comes to this kind of thing. And really appreciate you sharing, and hopefully there's a good therapist someplace that let you get past it. But here you are, being able to reinvent again and go to the next organization to help them. And
Yes.
they should be glad to have you.
Yeah, John, this is Jason Ewing. Yeah, thank you again for all of this. It's always it's just great to hear other people's experiences and us try to avoid some of the pitfalls that you had gone through. I think that's what's really key for us, is how do we make adjustments so that we're not, hit as hard, or our ability to recover is much quicker on that. I would like to just make clear to the group, I think there are some debrief sessions afterwards. I think Shanity's got one with the applications group. Bart, I'm not sure if you've got one or not, or planned, but and I'm going to be meeting with Stacy and to Steve. But I would encourage everybody to, and I think David's got one with the cyber team, but I encourage everybody to have a little bit of a debrief session. Think about what John shared with us. What are some of the gaps that we might have? What are some areas that we think we need to spend some focus time on? What's really important? What might be most important that we focus on? So take some time with your teams to do that before we get too far away from this meeting and we have things like I have where you can't remember. So anyways, John, thank you. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you. And if there's any other questions I can, or if we need to connect, I have great relation with the team, their family to me at Sky Lakes, Corey and Mike and the entire team. If there's like individual things that you want more information, I can connect you with the right people, and they're all willing to talk about it as well. Because whatever we can do to strengthen our brothers and sisters in the journey in healthcare and security, we're happy to do. So
Thank you.
All right. You guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.